Hello everyone, my name is Caleb Baker and I'm going to be giving a brief presentation on my campus tour game that I developed alongside with Vanessa Lund. So, without further ado, let's get started. So the premise of the game is that a window has recently broken on campus due to the derecho, and you are now tasked with fixing the window and using various resources on campus to do this. And this game walks you through the process of making glass, mixing colors, and then assembling the window. For the game construction, the game was constructed using HTML5, CSS, and JavaScript programming languages. HTML5 was used for the page and the structure of it. CSS was used for styling of the page, so any of the visual elements were CSS. And then JavaScript was also used for the operation of the game and the graphics of the game. So let's take a brief look at the gameplay here. So you start out the game with a little bit of the backstory here, regarding the derecho and what your task is, and then the first thing you do is hit start. So after this point, you are the Mustang character, and you are now walking toward. And so in order to do this, you have to jump over the logs that are situated right here. And then once you hit the end here, then you are able to go into Ward. And here is more of the same thing, just jumping over the logs. So once you get in the Ward, you have a color mixing game. And so essentially what this tasks you to do is you already have the colors yellow, red, and blue. And so now your task is to create three new colors. In this case, orange, purple, and green. So those are the three colors that you paint, and you can basically select what your first color is. So let's just say I selected yellow, and then you select what your second color is. Let's say I selected blue, then you would make green. So yeah, that's the premise of this part of it. And once you've created all three of your colors, then you press the done button. So once you've done your color mixing in Word, there is basically an animation that plays that you walk through the exit to Word, down through the tunnel, and then there's something blocking the door. So then you get through the door and you hit enter the tunnel. At this point, you jump over this part to get through like this, and after you've completed that, then you are now in the glass making part, which occurs internally. So that was the purpose of going through the tunnel, essentially. Um, so um, as you can see, you make different elements here. In this case, silicon dioxide, sodium oxide, and calcium oxide. So you can press these buttons here to add one of each, or one of whatever you're trying to do here. So once you've completed all three of these, then the page will give you a notification that you successfully made the glass, and then you travel back to the chapel to fix the window. So here is the actual window coloring part. This is basically the assembly of the window. And as you can see, not only do you have the three colors that you started with here, you also have the three colors that you created in the color mixing part. And so then you are able to essentially click on any of these colors and then draw and make your own window. So that is essentially the purpose of the, or I guess a brief walkthrough of the entire game. So now, let's look at the code and see how it was done. So, I will be taking a look here at the color mixing game. Basically, we split the work as a group in the two different parts. I took the color mixing game, and I also did the window coloring. So I'll take a pretty good look here at the color mixing part, and then the window part is pretty similar, so I'll go over it briefly at the end. So as you can see, this is the head of the program. Basically here we are specifying what type of programming language we're talking about here, and so in this case it's HTML. And then here is where we create where the game is. So you can see the border here is created with a 10 pixel border around the object. And then we also have a padding here, which is basically the space around the object that we want to leave blank. And this is all a style element. So that means essentially that it is CSS, and those are all different, basically, graphics. And here we specify the width and the height of the canvas, essentially, that we want our game to be on. So in here we move into the scripting part of the game, and this is written in JavaScript. So this is essentially the functionality of the game is more established in the JavaScript portion of it. So right here we have a bunch of different declarations. Basically this is creating a variable. So this one specifically is the canvas position, and so this grabs the position of where the game is, essentially. And then another important one for this one specifically is the game level. So once you've created one of your colors, then you're on level 1. Once you've created the next color, you're on level 2. And once you've created the final level, you're on level 3. And so that will change depending on what level you were on. And this function right here is what advances the game level. And so this little portion right here, the plus plus, basically adds 1 to the level. And so we can call this function whenever we want to basically up the level. So this is getPosition, which is a function that basically grabs the position of your mouse for the game. This is really the big one, is the update function. So this is called continuously the entire game, which keeps updating the graphics. So for example, let's just look at one of these chunks. So here we have the fill style equals white, and that basically is specifying what color we want whatever we're going to do to be. So in this case we want the color to be white, and then here is fill rect. Basically that's filling in a rectangle. And so the first number here is your X value. So that's where you want it to be located on the canvas. And Y is also where you want it to be located on the canvas. Kind of think of it like a graph in your X and Y axis. And then here is your width and height. Or height and width, excuse me. And so, you know, similar to a graph, your height and width. Here we begin our path, and then we make the rectangle. So basically that is how that chunk of code works there, and then this is repeated several times for every sort of graphic that shows up in the game. So here's another important part. Depending on the game level, it will display a different text on the game. So for example, if you're on level 1, it tells you to make the color purple. Or if you're on level 2, it says make the color orange. And then finally, once you've made your way all through all those levels, you've successfully made all the colors, it says, and then press the done button to continue. So here are the different functions that are called when you hit the buttons to change the colors. So here are all the buttons essentially. So in this case, here's the top yellow button, the top red button, and the top blue button, and then that's repeated for the second color. So basically when you click on one of these buttons, it calls the function change to yellow. We'll go back and see. Basically, it calls the function change to yellow, which then changes the color to yellow. And then here is the formatting of the buttons. So this is another style element, which basically, is graphics. And so we decide that we don't want any border on these buttons. We want the color of them to be white. Here's the spacing around it. We want the text to be center aligned, and it goes on. So basically, that's a look at the sort of background of it here. And then we have a bunch of closing elements down here. So basically we close the body here, and then at the end we say we're done with the HTML. So that's the end of our code, is basically what we're saying is happening there. So I'm not going to, just for the sake of time, get too far into the window coloring code, but some important things to note about this particularly is this portion here. So we have a mouse X and a mouse Y. So basically our mouse X and mouse Y is the X coordinate and the Y coordinate of where your mouse is. And so that is continuously changing. And so basically what this block of code here does is it colors in wherever your mouse is located, and you also have to be clicking. So that is that. Big difference there. There are several other subtle differences like these event listeners. And basically what these do is it just checks if your mouse is clicked or if it's not clicked. Those are essentially what those do. And then, for example, here is set mouse position. So that's gonna check what the position is of your mouse, and then every time it does that, it also checks to see if the color is changed, because you could have changed colors in between the last time you clicked and the time that you're clicking now. Yeah, so that's the big one on the window coloring code. I'd like to thank you for listening to my presentation. I hope you found it interesting, and to see the rest of the code, because I mostly just addressed the color mixing and the window coloring, be sure to check out Vanessa's presentation. Yeah, so thank you very much, and have a nice day.